gentlemen, the Queen.
Hello, Highness. Oh, what happened to her hair? She had some yesterday.
Wishful thinking, that's all.
You know, she's not bad for a first try.
You'd better be beautiful. A genius and terribly rich.
The beauty she got from my daughter. The genius she inherited from me. You better get busy with your contribution, my boy.
My name is Angelo Lobo. That's me a few years after my second divorce. I decided to make this movie to point out some important issues and some devastating things that I found out while I went through the family law court system. Once I scraped up enough money, I bought a camera and we set off to find out who else was going through the same problems. First stop, Scottsdale, Arizona. I ended up bumping into a real Romeo.
What's your name?
Danielle Velasquez.
What's your name?
Vincent Dunn.
Okay, Vincent. So, are you guys dating?
No, we're just friends.
You're friends.
Yes.
Have either one of you guys had a one-night stand?
I've never had, yes.
You had one-night stand?
I was gonna say no, but yes, I have.
Okay, how about you?
Every night. No, I'm just playing.
Okay.
Probably like once or twice, yeah.
Our society is faced with a challenge right now, and that is to say, when man and woman have sex and a child is conceived, now we have to decide, okay, what will we do if that pregnancy is brought to term and a child is born, and now we have another human being in our society that needs care? Who is responsible for the care of that child?
It makes me terribly jittery, but I'm sure that you, as a man...
Oh, I'll be glad to take over.
It's wonderful how some of us can dig holes for ourselves and think we're having a good time when we fall into them.
You better not sleep with women that you wouldn't want to have in your life for the next 18 years. Or women that you know are unstable, and the same goes for women.
I don't want children.
You don't want children. Why not?
I'm too narcissistic for my own good.
I want children, dude. Yeah, I think I'm ready.
Little does he know.
I have had a one-night stand. I don't believe in them. They're crap. They suck, for the most part.
My parents are divorced, and it was actually pretty nasty.
Are you going to get married before you have kids?
Yeah, maybe.
Have you thought about it?
I don't know. Hey, I don't plan it, you know what I mean? Shit happens.
Okay, so state your name again.
Jeffrey Schuster.
Jeffrey, what do you do for a living?
CFO of Lodge Cubing.
Yeah. You say you pay child support?
Yes, I do.
Oh, how many kids you got?
One.
6-year-old.
I think that there should be a cap on what they believe that a 6-year-old child, for her living expenses, for education, which happens to be paid for, private school, should have a cap. And then alimony should have a cap on the style of living. Forget Smith-Ostler, all that crap. Everything should be capped exactly what they should be. And when they take advantage of the fact that somebody is a high earner and they believe that a 6-year-old child, not in my case, should be making $8,000 a month, wink, wink, I think that that's not something that's right.
I think that if you're not ready to have a child and you're not ready to support a child, then you need to protect yourself.
How do you do that?
The capital C, baby. The capital C.
Birth control, it's equal. I mean, women or man, you have to use whatever type of sexual protection you can get.
If only it was that simple. Next stop, Sacramento, California. My search led me to the state capitol to talk to the politicians on the laws and policies in place.
Marriage in so many sectors is just not considered as important, nearly, as it used to be, or certainly should be, in all arenas. And we have to look at ourselves. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the state of California, when you go out and you apply for a marriage license, a couple, they decide to get married, they have to go out and get licensed like in any other part of that license fee. You know where that $15, $20 goes? It goes into divorce programs and the programs that are dealing with divorce issues and the prevention of divorce and such. But the message is saying it's not exactly a positive outlook here. I mean, it's a pessimistic view. We expect, you know, all or most marriages end in divorce, so we're going to tax you.
Freedom of choice, a long fought for, hard-won freedom. Yet how many of us are really prepared to exercise it?
Understand, gentlemen, that the divorce industry in America is an absolute industry. It's been created over the past 30 years. I would refer you perhaps to the largest federal study ever done about divorce. Sanford Braver, Dr. Braver from Arizona University, was given $10 million by the federal government, Dr. Braver went in believing that the majority of sustained facts, he believed they were going to be sustained, about dads not wanting to be involved in their children's lives, about dads being abusive, about dads not wanting to pay child support. He believed that he was going to sustain all these. After 8 years of study, he came and he addressed both houses of Congress and he said that everything he went in believing was wrong. Not one of the premises he based his research on was correct. He published a book called Divorced Dads Shattering the Myths. In that book, he exposed a lot of what's going on right now in America. He explained that by 2000 terms, the Child Support Collection Agency in America was the fastest growing government entity in this country.
It's hard to see clearly through a haze of emotion. Hard to accept the fact that a person will not change just because you love him and want him to change. Different kinds of people can find happiness together, but only when they have the courage to look at each other honestly and can really accept the personality that they find.
Well, not to put it too serious a bend on it, but the social fabric that's in this country is breaking down. People no longer look at family as an obligation. They think of it as a luxury. And they don't realize that it takes work and time and effort, and it's not easy. We live in a disposable country. And divorce in and of itself isn't the problem. It's divorce with children that creates the problem. Now people are married 2, 3, and 4 times. And they have extended families. You know, you have 2 different dads, 6 or 7 different siblings that are only half brothers, quarter brothers. And that's going to continue to happen until people realize that it's not disposable.
Welcome to the third race at the Honeymoon is Over Downs. They're at the gate, and they're off. Jumping out in the lead is Romance and Affection, with Domestic Bliss in close behind. It's Romance and Affection and Domestic Bliss. Here comes Marriage Vows, followed by Immediate Child. Romance and Affection falling off quickly. Mortgaged Up the Ass, overtaking Domestic Bliss. And here comes Nasty Attitude, followed by More Children and Drinking Heavily. Coming down the backstretch, Drinking Heavily moving out in front of Mortgaged Up the Ass. But coming on strong on the outside is Credit in Shambles. It's Credit in Shambles, followed by I Don't Give a Shit, Nasty Attitude, and Up Yours Keep. Up Yours Keep challenging for second, going into the clubhouse turn. Passing on the rail is I Don't Give a Shit taking the lead. Followed comes spinning out of the turn. I Don't Give a Shit still in front. Up Yours Keep challenging for the lead. Up Yours Keep and I Don't Give a Shit neck and neck. And down the stretch they come. Up Yours Keep is pulling away from I Don't Give a Shit by a length. Coming on strong is I Am Out of Here. And at the wire, it's Up Yours, I Don't Give a Shit, and I Am Out of Here.
The majority of the time, women are the primary caretakers. That's the way our country is. That's the way the world is right now. And of course, we'd like to see some social change around that, but that is what is. So when we go to these family court systems and we go through divorces, and 60% of marriages end in divorce right now, there's going to be a challenge with what do we do with the children? Well, we believe it's the best interest of the child to stay with the caretaking that the child has been under. And if the mother's the primary caretaker, then that's the way it should stay. Unless, of course, there's some reason that gets presented to the courts that say, no, this is not the best situation for the child. And so the National Organization for Women is trying to make sure that women are served and children's best interests are served. So for now, women are the caretakers, and we're going to be in there advocating to make sure that the children get their mothers.
There's always been some form of child support. The child support we're talking about now is relatively new. And child support initially was designed to help typically the mother with the children get started again.
The more people I talk to, the more I realized, hey, this is a nationwide problem. My next stop, Boston, Massachusetts, one of the birthplaces of our American independence.
Let's try to get into the courthouse here. We're actually doing a documentary today on child support. We're gonna do a documentary today.
I'm not allowed in the building, so you have to leave right now.
Can we just get in to talk to the DOR?
No.
We're just gonna ask some questions. We just have to ask some questions about child support enforcement.
Sorry, folks, that didn't work. They even sent me a letter just in case I didn't get the point. Please be advised that your request to film at the Middlesex Division of the Probate of the Family Court Department for your proposed documentary has been denied. Let's try talking to an ordinary guy on the streets and see what he has to say. How many kids you got, Claude?
2.
2 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see your kids?
Do I see my son almost every day? My daughter, I do not see. I haven't seen her in about 2 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Her mother moved away when she was living in Brockton. I would have problems seeing her. I would see her once a week or something like that. But since the mother moved away, she broke off all contact. The mother got remarried. Since then, doesn't feel like she needs me in the picture anymore. She's got a new husband. I mean, we were never married, but she's got a husband now. So far, all she's using me is like a paycheck. Right now, I pay $155 a week, $155 a week. If you only made $250, they'll take the $150 and leave you with almost nothing, you know. But I've got 2 buddies of mine locked up right now, you know. They were forced to pay child support. They got jobs making a minimum wage or whatever they were making. Child support was taking 80% of their pay. They couldn't afford it, you know. They quit their jobs. Next thing you know, the child support, you know, mounts up. And what do? The next thing they do is they pick you up and they lock you up. You know, they put you behind bars because that way, I guess they get some service out of you or something. Then you get released in 3 months. If you don't find work that's, you know, good enough to support you and the child support, then, you know, you're back in that position. You know, you're going to get locked up again.
So I decided to talk to one of those guys who was locked up.
Married? No.
Any children?
No. I'm still a child. Gotta grow up myself before I have any.
In case you didn't notice, this is a maximum security prison. Who have they got in here? A serial killer? Serial rapist? A mass murderer? Nope, it's John Matari, arrested for not paying his child support, which has accumulated to over $119,000. He's also on a hunger strike.
I came in not cooperating, right? It was not cooperation with jail. And I gave him a letter because it's very easy for people to put words in your mouth, especially when you're behind bars. So when I showed up at the jail, I gave him a letter addressed to the commissioner down to the Jamesville Correctional Facility saying, look here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to obey any of your orders. I'm not going to cooperate with processing. I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to drink voluntarily. Not because I want to hurt myself. This isn't a hunger strike, the classic hunger strike where I want to inflict pain on you, and if you don't meet my conditions, I'm going to starve myself to death. No, I'm just not cooperating. I'm your responsibility. You guys have pulled me in here. I want you to feed me. I want you to keep me hydrated. I started carrying this in the hall, and right next to it, it said, Dom, I love you. And I started walking around out there. And they said, Mr. Matari, you can't do that in the hall. We're going to arrest you. And I go, fine, I don't care. And when that started happening, and I knew I can express my love for Dominic, and these guys can't stop me. I'm in control now. Now they're the ones jumping through the hoops. And I found a very peaceful way to do it, not with anger, right? And I went up there not with anger, but because I love my child.
I agreed with John. Fighting wasn't the answer, and anger was not going to solve any of the problems. Millions and millions of non-custodial parents today are feeling a serious pain. They are very angry that they cannot see their children.
Parental alienation is not real.
It was invented by this psychiatrist, Richard Gardner, who was a freak.
Parental alienation. Well, unfortunately, what's possible in a custody case where there's in a state where there's sole custody is that one of the parents can use the kids to create an advantage.
The child should have a right of having two parents. This is critical to the psychological well-being of the child. When you take a parent out of that child's life, you're stealing their birthright. You are executing their ego, their psyche. I mean, obviously, if it's an abusive parent or something like that, that's different. But we're talking about fit parents.
They can tell the kids that the other parent didn't really love them, or doesn't really care for them, or is trying to break up the family, and they can undercut and interpret any actions that the parent does.
The other person didn't like them and can get more money by claiming that they're abusive or they're violent or whatever.
There are children out there today, right now, that are being horrifically abused and neglected by a parent that's brainwashing them to despise a healthy parent. Taking a child's mind and will away from them has got to be one of the worst and most insidious forms of child abuse there is.
This isn't just about the men who've had this problem with the family courts, because as a man, what are you taught? You take it on the shoulder, you go on, you don't complain, and you just keep on going. But it's gotten to a point now where this is so pervasive and so wrong and so senseless in terms of the harsh nature of the sanction. There is no harsher sanction in our society today than to be separated from your children. And to be separated from your children on no fault of your own, but just because you happen to be designated non-custodial, think about the raw wounds that that's created.
Whenever parental alienation is present, the judge needs to show some courage and sanction the person who's perpetrating the alienation. If the court system really wants to be concerned about the true interests of children, which I don't think it ever has been, but if we really want to pursue that goal, they need to step up and show the courage to sanction the people who are causing the problems.
There's individual crime by young people between the ages of 20 and 21 years old that could be stopped by taking those in, the first offense, and sending them to some proper school and teaching them right from wrong and not throwing them in with hardened criminals throughout the country, because that's the greatest form for the making of the gangster.
I'll beat your back. Read your test results. Are you the father? I looked at his ass, told him don't bother. I'm the father of this gangster shit. Never thought that I have a bunch of bastard kids, little badass kids. I whoop their ass every night.
My first impression of Chris Encina was, wow, this is one really hardcore guy. But he turned out to be one of the nicest and most genuine people I have ever met. The only thing is, I had to move all his toys around.
I know what it is to grow up without a dad. And I don't want none of that for any of my kids. I mean, my other son I have, I've been with him since he was born. And to know that I have another son out there, 11 years later, and now I'm going on 13 years, it hurts me, because, you know, I don't want him to think, oh, my dad don't care, my dad doesn't love me, you know, he don't want to spend time with me. I miss him. You figure that there's a system out there trying to help you out, but honestly, they ain't trying to help you out. When you go into court, they treat you like dogs, because 80% of the people that go in there are males. And then the way they teach them, or the way they were brought up, is like every male that comes in here, every person comes in here is a deadbeat father, a deadbeat parent, whatever it is. So they treat you like a dog.
It's just the sheer volume. I have 20 paralegals, 3 attorneys, over 30,000 people a year. Yes, it's something where we could use 2 times, 3 times the staff. But sometimes we open our doors at the child support court and there's 150 people that have been in line since 5 o'clock in the morning.
They don't care what you gotta say. They don't. They just wanna know is how come you haven't given us our money? Or how much are you making now? That's all they're concerned about. And once you tell them, okay then, out the door, bring in the next case. And you're stuck on stupid. You're just sitting there like, you know?
People are getting arrested. They're always threatened with jail. Basically, the court finds that you are in contempt if you do not pay your child support. Even if you can't afford it, they don't want to hear that. But we found in a lot of interviews that the non-custodial parents usually have financial hardship, and they cannot convey that to the court system. No one seems to pay attention to it, and no one seems to be listening. It's across the country on a national basis, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it today. We're going to get up to the, well, basically we've tried all that. They don't want to let us in. So it's like, you know, we have a constitutional right to be able to film what's happening to people in the courtroom. They're basically, it's a freedom of speech, it's a freedom of having...
In a courtroom?
Yes. Yeah, well, we're talking about just the non-custodial parents that are waiting up there right now, basically.
You can't film in the hallways.
Oh, it's a frustrating deal, man. It's a frustrating deal. How can it concern anybody? No one wants to look at it. We got to get in that building.
Right. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Here we go! Here we go! I used to sit at
Camp Pendleton Marine Base, where the United States Marines fight for the protection and freedom of our country.
Waste away.
The hardest training in the field for a man or a woman is not enough to help them with the detrimental effects of divorce and custody issues.
I'm a Navy SEAL. I work out of Coronado, California. Immediately following 11 September 2001 in New York City, I was told I'd be deploying. So I put my wife and my 2-year-old son on a flight to Israel to visit with her family until I could return. I returned back from that deployment. My wife informed me she wanted a divorce and that she wasn't going to bring our son back. I didn't think there was any legal foundation for her to be able to do that. After a year in the California court system and about $120,000 in legal fees later, the California courts told me that she had done nothing illegal, she'd broken no laws, and they had no jurisdiction to order my son's return, although they did take jurisdiction over the marriage and the finances. And they weren't able to order that I paid not only support, but maximum support to her for having stolen my son away while I was gone.
A lot of our military personnel that come back from combat zones, and particularly Afghanistan, Iraq, right now, are often confronted with arrearages.
Well, there's not enough time to modify the child support. It takes about a month and a half, a month, 6 weeks to get into court to get a child support hearing. So what happens is these guys go off to war, and they've been paying child support based on an income that they're no longer making.
These guys may get called up in 10 days. You're a bank manager, say making 60 grand, suddenly you're a staff sergeant now making 20 grand, you're deployed in 15 days. There's no way with the backlog in California courts that you're getting in, there's no way you're getting any sort of justice. And so you go to Iraq, you come back after a year, you're a deadbeat dad because you've got a lot of back child support on a $60,000 a year salary, even if you're making 20, because the California courts were still recognizing you at $60,000.
So not only would somebody go off and fight in a war, but they come back when they're in arrears and find out that their driver's license has been suspended.
There's a gentleman from North Carolina who was taken prisoner of war, and he was actually held in one of Saddam's prisons for 5 months, tortured, the whole bit. The night he came home to the United States, he landed in North Carolina, they slapped the cuffs on him, claiming he was a deadbeat dad for an amount somewhere like $1,425 in arrears and child support. Now, when you're a prisoner of war, you'd think that would be an extenuating circumstance where somebody would say, hey, give the guy a chance to at least get home and write a check. I mean, was he supposed to go to Saddam and say, hey, I got a child support payment to make, can you go ahead and give me my checkbook and we can Western Union the money back home, just, I don't want to go to jail when I get back. Most people, the average normal person would think extenuating circumstance, let him come home, let him write the check, whatever. No, he gets off the plane, they slap the cuffs on him, he goes to jail.
My life is an imaginary life to my son. My son brags to his friends over in this other country he's living in. He brags to his friends all the time about me. I've had the social worker, the psychologist, the judge, everyone over there is all on my side and working to try and help and bring us back together the way it needs to be done. But you know, there's been a lot of mental, psychological damage. I wouldn't say even damage, but yeah, I miss my son a lot.
My name is Claire Bindoy. I have a 10-year-old and then I have an 8-year-old. They live in San Diego, borderline of National City. I get every other weekend and then Wednesdays for 2 hours. I pay $236 a month for the both of them.
And I see why there's certain people out there that get so frustrated and go like through certain extremes as far as outrage and stuff, and like say a lot of things towards like their attorneys or other people out there, is because people's not listening to them. I cry at nights because I know there's nothing that could be done about anything. I noticed that if you have money, people listen to you. If you don't have the money, the court system really sucks.
Families in most cases depend upon a paycheck for the necessities of life. There is an ever-present need for money when debts pile up because of sickness, temporary unemployment, pay cuts, or improvidence. Cash may be needed for the emergencies of birth, death, travel, or to take advantage of opportunities in education or business. Where can the self-respecting employed family of today turn for aid? Not to nature, as did the pioneer of 1833.
So how can we look at a society that we provide these safety mechanisms, law enforcement, fire departments, military, and try to protect their families? I think we have to look at new models. There has to be a better way to do this. There's just too many casualties.
I was served with someone else's court documents. I never got my day in court to begin with, and I had a default judgment set against me for child support. The only way I found out about it was 9 months later when DMV sent me a notice that they're taking my driver's license away for failure to pay child support. The DNA, excluded me as being the biological father, wasn't even remotely close. The blood types weren't even close. You can't go more than DNA. And I was just shocked and floored. A child that wasn't mine and that I didn't even know, you could be found the legal father of. Just so much as a photograph of you and the child is all that's needed to start the child support service process. And that one little tidbit of information is, and that I know I'll never be the same on. That's something I actually think I need therapy on.
So it's psychologically affecting you?
Oh, absolutely. Just the thought of being, up until 5, 6, 7, I can't be around these kids anymore, because is the mother going to go, well, you make a nice living, I don't make such a nice living, I'll name you as the father and collect money from you. Just that thought, that whole concept. How can it not affect you? I need just a moment.
Unbelievable.
It's just sad because I came from a family of 6 kids. I love having brothers and sisters. I'd actually like to have, 6 kids, but not now. And I just don't know if that's going to change anytime in the near future.
New York City, the melting pot of the world. New York statistics show that more women starting at the age of 16 are having children. My first interview was with FLR Now, an organization dedicated to child support reform. Founder Elder Hennix decided to give us an interview.
Child support is such a sensitive subject. No politician wants to touch it. And that's one of the reasons why I feel it is imperative for FLR Now to build the base of support that we're trying to build, because legislators do not have the will to do the right thing because they're so afraid of losing votes.
While I'm a children and families advocate, I've been coming up to Albany for a number of years, lobbying legislators The bills that I've been advocating for and lobbying these legislators is to keep families together by keeping parents involved in the lives of our children, whether they get divorced or separated. I have a daughter who's now 13 years old who lives 3 blocks away from me. And for years, I've been only allowed to see her because this is the law in New York State, 4 days a month and 4 hours a week. They cut out of her life. Good father. Father's been in her life always.
So, we've been hearing a lot lately about the problems of the Child Support Agency, but what's this all about? The agency started off with the best intentions at heart, to help vulnerable families by reclaiming money for children from absent parents. The agency was doomed from the start though. Initial problems included backlogs, overcharging and an 86% error rate. In 2003, Labour introduced a new computer system to try and deal with the problems of the CSA. However, as is usually the case with Labour throwing money at things, it ended up costing $12 million a year to chase just $8 million worth of debt a year. And still, 320,000 unresolved cases, 4 months till parents received their first payment, £600 million of investment, yet no improvement. This is an agency which has a proven track record of ruining people's lives. Labour's solution is to introduce electronic tagging to persistent non-payers and even bring in private companies to do their work for them and collect the debts.
And guess who else tried to privatize the child support collections?
One of the dirty secrets that I don't think many people know is that the neocons are privatizing or trying to privatize American government, and some of them are successful. The child support collection system. We have private companies now going for the child support collection system, and for every dollar they collect, and this is just one example, 50 cents goes for their collection.
Someone has to pay child support. And that whole process, again, is generated by the federal mandate that New York State gets 66 cents on the dollar for child support collection purposes, okay? 66 cents on the dollar. And New York State last year actually posted a profit. They're making money on this process.
I honestly don't know what that figure is.
Is it a high figure?
I'm sure it's in the millions of dollars.
How much money did we generate?
More than $1 billion in child support every year. There are, I could say in family court, there's about 350,000 child support related petitions filed every year too.
Once they cancel welfare, how much was welfare paying out to these people? You cancel welfare, these people are still getting money from somewhere. I don't see a lot of homeless people out. You know, I know they no longer have Section 8, no longer welfare. Where are these people all getting these money from? I mean, are they just milking the dads dry now? Is that what it is?
We have an agency called the Support Collection Unit, and they're the agent of the court, and they're responsible for collecting the money.
We'll put a lien on anything you try to buy within the next 10 years.
Having their brokerages accounts put liens on.
Take your tax refund if you're entitled to get money back with your taxes.
And their checking accounts have been taken.
We call that collection.
The system's not built to put the family back together. It survives and thrives and expands off the separation of a family because so many other entities come in that are able to make money.
Representing clients in divorce, family law matters, and criminal defense. Aggressive and affordable legal representation.
As a result, the root of all evil, money, is a driving force, and if I can make more money by keeping this family apart and not allowing the family to be a whole, then let's do it that way.
A lot of states have a top 10 most wanted deadbeat parent list. And for my columns, what I'll do is I'll look at those lists. If I'm writing about child support, I'll look at those lists and I'll look at who's on them, what they owe, and what their occupations are. Now, the average person probably thinks it's a bunch of guys who, you know, the top 10, oh, they must owe a lot of money. It must be doctors and lawyers and businessmen who aren't paying their kids. In reality, what you've got there is a bunch of roofers, maintenance men, general laborers, truck drivers. I don't think I've ever seen more than 1 or 2 people on those lists who even have a college education. You know, one of the top deadbeats in the state of Arizona right now is a roofer who owes $255,000 in back child support. Now you tell me, how does a roofer, what does a roofer make? $9 an hour, $10 an hour? How does a roofer end up with a $250,000 child support arrearage?
I think the government just found, they wanted a way to clean it up, after they canceled welfare. They just wanted a way to clean everything up, and so they just put, made the dads pay the child support, which I agreed with, but, I don't think the formula is right, for one, and I think, the mother should be held responsible for the child also, because it took two of them to make it,
I think it's 90-some% of all child support arrearages are owed by people who historically make $10,000 or less.
These guys don't have the money, and they're being imprisoned for failure to pay child support. That's debtor's prison. That's putting somebody in prison because they don't have money. We abolished debtor's prisons in this country supposedly 150 years ago, and now a form of debtor's prison is being reinstituted.
It's an interesting fact that people who have children in their life, men, if men are allowed to be in their children's life and can afford to pay child support, they do. Almost 100% of the time.
How is it that these low-income guys who don't even have steady work in many cases are capable of owing this much money in child support? Isn't there a problem with the system? And people don't seem to see it. All they hear is deadbeat dad, deadbeat dad, deadbeat dad.
It's like calling someone a nigger. It ought to be stricken from the vocabulary. It's a stereotype, right? That's all it is. It's a stereotype. They said they wanted to get the children, right, of parents who weren't paying child support to draw little posters, my mother, my father's a deadbeat, that they could put on the highway. And I think, what are you, crazy? Right? You want these kids to think of their parents as deadbeats, that they don't love them?
So the state budgets would collapse if they didn't have this money. And so there's an incentive to create deadbeat dads, because they get a stipend from the state. And so this industry builds on itself.
Wait a minute. What did he just say?
And so this industry builds on itself.
Okay, got it. Dallas, Texas, 1 hour outside of Tyler. Texas is most infamous for its incarceration of child support offenders in America.
There is a systemic incentive, much like where I come from in Houston, Texas, the Enron fraud trial, massive fraud, ruined the lives of thousands of employees and tens of thousands of investors, many of whom lost great amounts of life savings. We have the same kind of fraud going on in the child support regime because there is a systemic incentive to overstate the amount of the child support obligation.
Okay, hold on. What is going on here?
There is a systemic incentive to overstate the amount of the child support obligation.
In the whole of the USA, we make an organization with all the other mobs. We'll be like the body, like the eye of an octopus. And they'll be like the arms, the tentacles, eh?
Every county in America and every state in America is financially incentivized to ruin families.
Come on, is this for real?
And that's what they accomplished with their, when they did what they called reinventing welfare as they know it. They weren't doing what we were all thinking they were doing. What they were doing was incentivizing the states to turn into divorce factories and make money off of it.
When Washington, D.C. pays the states subsidy money for child support enforcement and collection, the money that the states get is a function of the dollars in play. The bigger the dollar amount that the state reports to the feds, the more money they get back from Washington.
It is a crypto welfare program that the state of Texas automatically sweeps all middle-class people and higher into, so that their very large child support awards can be included in those monies that get reported to the federal government, so that great big kickbacks can come to the budget of the state of Texas, so that the state of Texas can then hire more bureaucrats to find more people to sweep into the system, and it's a vicious cycle.
This is really getting out of hand. A non-custodial parent goes to court to get help and then sits around all day waiting for a judge, missing work, only to be sent away again. No wonder it is frustrating. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's it. That was the last straw. I had to see this for myself.
Warning, the footage you are about to view could be detrimental to your constitutional rights.
After I sign this order, next month I'm not going to remember this case. I might remember your face. I'm good at remembering faces, but I'm not going to remember this specific case. They have more than they can say grace over. So you have to be proactive for yourself. If Mr. Blanco doesn't follow through with what he's promised me here today that he's going to do, if he misses 2 months of payment, then you contact the Office of the Attorney General and they'll initiate the motion to revoke his probation.
I guess when you're standing there in front of the judge, you kind of feel like a criminal, you know? Like you just don't want to pay, but it's not that you don't want to pay, it's that you may not be able to pay what you're supposed to pay. And you get to a point that you get so behind. And again, I do see my kids, and they know that I'm behind on my child support. That kind of makes me feel bad too, because, you know, somehow I know they feel like, oh, my dad is, you know, is not paying our child support.
Mr. Blanco, you don't have a great amount of child support arrears. Her job and my job is to ensure that it doesn't get bigger. What is your job? Tell me your job.
To pay?
Right. Each and every month. That's all you have to do, and you'll avoid court proceedings. Right?
But you know, they make it tough on you when you're trying to make a living, and you know, stuff happens and you get behind. And then there's a month where you don't pay any money, and then you realize that you're not making enough money to pay your obligations.
There are a lot of people who have drug dependencies and various other problems, homeless situations, and those people are still assessed child support at minimum wage, even though there's no possibility of them ever being able to meet that child support burden.
I think it's, like I said, it's far beyond anything the mafia ever did.
I believe your sister came and paid $100, and she had told me last week that she was going to bring $500. So when an additional $400 is paid, I'll be happy to reconsider your release from jail. But I cannot release you based upon the amount that has been paid. I found that you were in contempt, and I sentenced you to 180 days in jail until child support was paid. Child support has been paid on your behalf. $750 was paid. Now, I would have liked to have seen $2,000.
What hurt me the most in Texas was how many people were caught in this web. Case after case after case of men and some women incarcerated, day in, day out. As you can see, not one of them had any legal representation.
And it's a vicious cycle.
Even though the climate was set against non-custodial parents, I did the best that I could. The key was to be the best parent that I could be. I did everything I had to do to be in my children's life. My search led me to Hollywood, California, where I met 2 generations that were devastated by divorce and child separation. Ed Vallejo and his family have not seen their children in over 5.5 years.
I was born here in the United States. I have family in Spain. I got married there, and I have 2 children now. I got divorced in 2000, and yet I signed an agreement with her that there would be no problem as far as visitation rights and bringing the children back to the United States. She filed I don't know what in the courts. I don't know what she told the courts. I guess the same thing she's telling the child support here in the United States. And since 2001, I lost that privilege altogether. These letters I'm getting from the child support, I feel are a type of extortion.
Ed is not the only one missing his kids. When a family is devastated by divorce or custody issues, it also affects the extended family. This is Ed Vallejo Sr. and his wife Cielo.
We miss so much of them.
and I see my son, the pain he has. See his children or visit them just for a few hours. They're so beautiful.
Father's Day came around, I think it was in June of '01, and it was a nightmare. I guess she was seeing somebody and wanted the kids to spend Father's Day with her and her boyfriend, so it was a problem. So, and I was told at that time, if it's not in the judgment, you don't get it. That's kind of an odd approach to visitation. Generally, the visitation schedule in your judgment is viewed as a minimum that you get to see your kids. And obviously, you know, if somebody's going to be out of town, they'll say, do you want to take the kids, as opposed to leaving them with the sitter? And people work cooperatively, not my ex-wife. This was all about punishing me. And it got worse, and it got worse. I don't know what to do. I will go over to the police department, and they don't want to get involved in matters of visitation. They tell you to go to the family court. Disappeared with the kids for like 5 or 6 days. I had no idea where they were. I couldn't reach them by phone. I was going crazy. There's no recourse against the woman. They're saying, well, who will take care of the children if I'm in jail? How will I buy food for the children if I have to pay a fine? And the judges just let it go on and on and on and on.
Well, I'm 3 years into this divorce mess. I think I'm on, probably 13th or 14th judge. And nobody seems to want to pay attention to, my civil and constitutional rights. And they'll ignore, they'll ignore a lot of things on my ex-wife's side in the same order, but they'll try and prosecute me for one little piece of it. My wife went in with ex parte letters, got an order of protection that barred me from contact with her, and then later that evening I was called by the cops, brought back over the county line, and served with another one that would not allow me to have any contact with my children whatsoever. 3 years when you keep going through this stuff, you have to relive it over and over and over again. Shortly after the 6 months or sometime during it, I had a nervous breakdown, missed 8 months of work. I'm still not back to, my capability of what I do. I mean, I design MRI imaging systems and things to, help forward medical stuff. And for 8 months, I was out of work. I had shakes. It was a nightmare. And until you're in the middle of this, people tell you that this kind of stuff goes on, but, you just can't conceive of it. I mean, I spent 30 years in a lab, designing things like this, had no concept that, judges wouldn't follow the laws, wouldn't enforce them, would allow perjury to occur in their courtroom. Just so completely biased. It was just outside of anything I had ever experienced. And it's destroyed me financially, physically and mentally. And you can't stop. You can't just sit down and say, I don't want to play anymore, because then you just steamroller, you could be in jail. I can't afford the child's. I make $100,000 a year. They're making me pay more than twice what the CSSA standards are for child support, and wanted to pay alimony on top of that. Now, right now I drive a 1991 Honda Civic that the muffler just fell off of on the way over here. She just brought a $30,000 new van, just redid the outside of the house, new deck, new interior, new furniture, and
It's moving her boyfriend in.
And is moving her boyfriend in, that's right. And I just had to take, this past week, a $39,000 loan against my retirement to pay off all the lawyers and all the rest of the crap, and that's it, I'm done. there's no place else to go.
All the social ills we don't want to have in our society are common denominators to single-parent homes. Okay? Moreover, because we continue to disenfranchise men from the process, we continue to use men as whipping posts in the process, men are increasingly turning to alcohol and substance abuse as a way to alleviate the pain that they feel.
It's epidemic, pandemic. A lot of folks that are on minimum wage presumptions are living basically not even paycheck to paycheck. Cocaine, meth, they're smoking pot. Alcoholism is rampant.
The child support system can be so detrimental on non-custodial parents, primarily men, that it causes death.
In the case of Thomas Alimo, a man who committed suicide 5 years ago, he was a gentle soul. He would not hurt anybody. And so what he did was he wrote to the police and he told them where they'd find his body. He went into the woods and he hung himself because he couldn't stand the pain any longer.
For 3 years in the family court of Suffolk County, he wasn't allowed to see his children. There was no finding he was an unfit parent. They had bled him for probably $100,000. He was going broke. He couldn't lean into his parents anymore. He decided to take his own life. And that's not uncommon, unfortunately, in America today.
I'd get maybe 2 or 3 phone calls a day from fathers, not only in this country, by the way, from England, from other places, as far as Australia, who've read my work, who are desperate, who are on the verge of suicide.
A normal day in downtown Tyler turns into a scene of terror and tragedy, all sparked by a bitter divorce battle between a man and his wife. 3 people are dead, including the gunman. 4 others hurt, 3 of them officers.
This is First News at 4.
There are some startling details emerging about the man who walked into the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle yesterday with that fake grenade. Police thought it was real, and they shot and killed Perry Manley.
According to a friend, Manley wanted to pay, but on his terms. He felt the child custody laws were unfair, and that if a parent had to pay into the system, then that parent should split custody 50-50.
I never got to say goodbye to him. But the worst thing that will happen is if he died in vain. That'll be the worst. If nobody covers this and nobody talks about this and nothing ever changes.
In a letter that he wrote, Manley suggests that he knew in that letter that he was going to die. His letter reads, quote, "In the event that I can't call you, I want to say one thing. I love all 3 of my children. I know they have a good deal of hate to deal with. Children should never have to choose between their parents."
My name's Larry Kirkman, and this is a bus that I created to educate our public. The Crispy Bus will be traveling the United States promoting equal shared parenting. Children's Rights Initiative for Sharing Parents Equally is a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring that the children of divorce or separation have access to both parents equally. Anybody that's been through our court system knows that it is not equally shared, and that's what we're all about. The state of Iowa is the only one that comes close to having the 50-50 custody. The rest of the states are very biased and do not have that. So we're hoping to travel the country and educate people and try to get the other 49 states to share equal custody, because that is what's in the best interest of our children.
We're pinning at the corner of 1550 West 6th Avenue in San Diego, right across the street from the Superior Court. This is one of the main courthouses in the county with respect to family court matters. The court prevents them from seeing their children, or limiting their time with their children. This is one of the places in San Diego County where it happens.
I just hope that one day that our children will be able to have equal access to both parents equally, and that we don't get caught up in this court system battle that's going on out there right now.
My trip led me back to New York City, where I met up with John Murtari again. He just got released from jail. This time, the only thing missing was the tube in his nose. How are you?
Good, very good to see you again.
Good
Be a
to
free
see you.
man about it.
That's what I am to
Do I look better without the tube up my nose? And we think we've recognized everybody's civil rights. If you're gay, if you're a woman, if you're black, if you're handicapped, right? We think there aren't any more. And I think the last civil right threshold is the right of a mother and a father to be a parent to their children free of government interference. That whether you're a poor parent, an average parent, or a good parent, we're going to recognize you as an equal and fit parent.
Soon after we interviewed him, John Murtari was arrested again for peacefully protesting for parental rights. He wrote in chalk outside of a federal building, "Dom, I love you," to his son.
I think one of the interesting things that's happening to drive change is that not only are men starting to talk about this and say, this is wrong what happened to me in family court, and it's not only wrong what happened to me, but it happened to all my other friends, and they didn't want to get divorced, and all of a sudden they ended up being divorced. And it's not just the men that are coming together around this, but it's also the women that are coming together around this.
There is a court system that is in deep disarray, and it is dramatically, deleteriously affecting the future of families, women, children, men alike. So let's work to change it.
Someone else on the front line striving for change is Greg Fisher, the children's lobbyist. Every day he fights to have senators sign on to the shared parenting bill, a bill that will alleviate most of these issues.
Parental suicide does go up 5 times for fit parents that are removed from their children. And that's the urgency of this legislation. This is a real example of somebody who will never get to be with his children again, and children will never get to be with him. So the idea here is for a senator that has been asked to sign on to the legislation by the Suffolk County Legislature in a unanimous resolution to ask the state representatives to sign on. This legislator has refused.
He usually gets turned down and more often than not escorted off the premises by security guards.
I know. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Is Ken around?
No, he's not.
Is his legislative assistant around?
Let me check.
Okay.
Pass something along?
Yeah, sure. My name's Greg Fisher. I'd like to talk to him. I've talked to him by phone before.
Who that is who?
Oh, God, I can't remember the name.
Filming, please.
We were all promptly escorted out of the building. Back in Boston, I bumped into Brian Banda outside of the family courthouse. He was waiting for his dad that he hadn't seen in years.
It's a little nervous, but for the most part, I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I feel comfortable.
Yeah?
So.
Have you talked to him on the phone?
I have. I actually just got off the phone with him. He should be arriving shortly. He's looking for the courthouse, actually, so he should be here momentarily.
Wow. When's the last time you saw him?
I don't remember. As far as I know, I've seen him. I might have been 3, maybe younger. So. Yes. How you doing? Yeah, this is my dad actually. So this will be the first time I've seen him since before I was 3, probably. So.
Yeah. How you doing?
Pretty good.
You look good.
Yeah, I was waiting outside and these guys caught me. They were doing a documentary, so I offered my assistance. So, interesting matter actually. So.
I'm sorry, sir, what's your name?
Daryl.
Daryl? How do you feel right now?
A little strange. Kind of happy to see him at least. A little nervous.
There are blessings in life, and this was one of them. It really showed me that there is hope, and I met some great people out there that are still doing something about it every day. What would you like your kids to know today?
I'd like them to know that they have to maintain an optimistic attitude. They have to realize that they are the heirs apparent of this great nation. That if we don't collectively, men and women, hold hands in unity and steadfastly resist the onslaught of destruction in this country emanating from the family courts, we haven't got a prayer.
I just want you to know that I love you with all my heart, and I'm not giving up on you girls, ever. And I will do anything that I can to get you guys back.
I've tried to keep a good relationship with my ex-wife simply for the kids. And I've told her a million times, let's talk about it, let's solve the problems, whatever the issues are. Speaking is the best way, and let's do it for the kids. Not for us, let's do it for the kids.
I'd like to see the law require the presumption of shared parenting. I'd like to see law guardians be trained. I'd like to see some common sense in the courtroom, but maybe I'm dreaming.
There's a sense of hopelessness out there and despair that is pervasive. And if you do anything in this process that contributes a little bit of encouragement and says there's real hope. The message that Jim and I carry all the time when we're doing the radio show is politicians are politicians. They're responsive when people really bring to their attention something that needs to be changed.
Let's put the truth out there and debate it as a society. What do we want? Do we want this as a society? Or, do we want our children to grow up with both parents? Every poll that's taken shows that shared parenting is enormously popular.
We need more victims. We need more perpetrators to keep our prisons full, to keep our courts full, to keep our child, all the economic reasons, all right? A positive message to men, to get your head out of your butt and start doing something to help bring this country and the world back to where we need it to be, where it's equitable, where we have concepts of fairness, where we have concepts of best interests of children mean something besides somebody else's wallet.
If we could ensure that the government and business and communities equally took a role, then we would know that the child didn't go hungry, and the child had a roof over its head, and the child had clothes, and the child had school books. And if the parent didn't pay, then we would have a system in place to resolve that, and a just system in place to resolve that. So there's more we can do. But once again, I think we need to talk about solutions and stop doing all the blaming. And we know the anecdotes are out there, we know there's abuses on both sides, but that's not getting us to a solution. So let's step up and fix it.
Maybe mom doesn't agree with everything dad does. Maybe dad doesn't agree with everything. But at one point, those people so loved themselves and saw in each other the best qualities that they wanted to be with for the rest of their lives. So why would we now, because they've made other decisions, take that away from the child that they created out of their love?
Thank you. I'll be right back. Where are you going? During our separation, my wife and I decided not to set foot in any family court system. We've decided on a plan that works for us as parents and be committed to the best parents we could be. I'm committed to being the best dad no matter what. When I have my kids, there is no percentage. They're all mine, and I get to spend the best time of my life with them. If we can all agree that the system is broken, we must reform it. Our children cannot wait for us to act. Time is running out, and it is our responsibility. If we fail, we are doomed to repeat the past.